Hola everyone! Welcome to Flexibility Script. This video is going to be going into a banded movement mobilization that can be found in the book Release Your Flexibility Potential. Available on flexibilityscript.com by paperback, and I also have it on Amazon on paperback and ebook as well, and rubberbandits.com also has the ebook. So this movement is going to be going into your hip flexors to hamstring. It's actually called the banded hip flexor to hamstring release because it mobilizes the hip flexors and the hamstrings, really mobilizes the joint capsule. It can be found on page 49 for those of you who do have the book. And just a little picture of a little sneak peek of some of the things that we'll be doing. And the band is positioned just as so, and we'll end up leaning down into like a bit of a hip flexor stretch and then straightening that other leg to go into a bit of a hamstring stretch. So I'll kind of talk you through it all. I already have the band positioned behind me. I'm using a door anchor to position the band, and just to demonstrate, this is the door anchor made by Lateral. Looks just as so. If you have the band, you'll take your door anchor, you'll take the band, take the door anchor, and then you'll loop that anchor part that's supposed to go through the door, through the band, pull through, and then once you have it all nice and set, open the door and you place the band toward the hinge side, and then you close it, and then you're good to go. So also, in order to know what size band you should use, there's a little video I have. It's also in the book, but there's a little video I have that goes into the band tensions and what's best for you individually. It'll kind of help you out so that you always select the band that's right for you, that has the right amount of tension for you as we go to open everything up. So sometimes the tissues in the front of the hip can get a little bit sticky, and sometimes that femur position can slightly shift. Sometimes from things like sitting a lot can end up having that femur, your thigh bone shift forward, and the band has this nice way of gently mobilizing it back and allowing for more range of motion in hip flexion. And with this mobilization, it'll help that, along with opening up the tissues along the posterior chain, so the back side, and then the anterior chain, so the front side of you. One leg will have more of that hip flexor front of the hip, the other leg will have more of the hamstring. So to get started, I'm going to come back behind here, and I'm going to get the band to go right through, right so that it's right around hip level / thigh level. So I'm bringing it up so that it is right at the very top of my thigh, not up at the hip, but right there. And then from here, I'm walking forward to tension, and I keep walking forward till I feel like that band is kind of pulling me, and I'm going to be taking my leg and I'm bringing it forward. And then if I want a little bit more, I can always scoot forward into a little bit more tension, but it's nice to find a place where you feel this band is pulling you, but it's not, you're in full control of it. So it's not too much, just enough so that you feel a nice light pull back. And this will kind of help start creating some space, a little distraction in your hip, and gently mobilizing that femur back and helping clear the hip capsule and allowing it for the ability to rotate and move nice and freely. So from here, once I'm here, I just want to make sure that this knee isn't positioned this way, that I'm keeping it slightly back, and this will allow my hip to be able to drive forward towards the ground. As I drive this hip forward towards the ground, I really work on maintaining a glute squeeze, and that glute squeeze will be the thing that drives me forward. And then with this front leg, I'm thinking about driving it out away from me, and this driving out is coming from the muscles along my hips here that help drive that knee out, and I'm working on driving out as I squeeze that glute to drive the hip towards the ground. Once I find my end point, I'll pause, and then I'm just going to be driving back, trying to straighten this leg out as much as I can. Now to start, even if that knee that's as far back as it goes into the hamstring stretch, that's okay. You're gonna find that with every repetition, you're gonna be further able to really squeeze that glute, drive that hip down towards the ground as you drive that knee out. And then you drive back, and with every rep, it should get a little easier and easier to keep slowly easing back into full leg extension. So as I drive this knee out and I glute squeeze down, I also have the option to work my elbows down towards the ground. I can pause there, and then I'll drive back. Notice that when I do drive back, that I make sure that I am not doing that and then reaching for the floor. My hands kind of stayed where they're at, and I'm just driving myself back to try to straighten my hip back to try to straighten that leg. Again, I drive this front knee out, squeeze the glute, elbow comes down towards the ground, and I sometimes use that elbow as a good indicator as to how far I'm getting down towards bringing the hip towards the ground, because when it does end up coming down, I'm usually really nice and opened up through the front of the hip. So again, I drive out, I sink down, and then I'll come back out of it. I can also alternate and do the other elbow, and it creates, both elbows kind of create different feels. So I like sometimes just alternating one elbow down, driving back. I could hold that a little longer, down. Glute squeeze is really strong, and that glute squeeze is always driving my hip down towards the ground. And I just want to make sure that it's not this motion here, where I'm not arching my back and just kind of resting on my joints, that I stay pretty braced with that rib cage down and that glute squeeze being the thing that really everything's coming down towards the ground and everything's coming back. Now from here, I can add a little play with different angles from my upper body, meaning as I drive out and I glute squeeze, I can drive myself away from that leg, increasing the stretch. I may feel some opening up along the inner thigh. I can come back to center and again drive back. I can do the same thing the other way where I drive out, except I rotate towards that leg and back. It's almost like every time I drive my hip forward, I keep my hip forward, but I'm rotating my torso like I'm trying to turn my belly button to face one direction. I drive back, I come back forward, and I'm turning to almost aim to turn the belly button towards the other side, and then again I drive back. I can also do this with picking this knee up, and that sometimes intensifies that stretch to the front of the hip. Just the same thing, I can lift up and I can drive out and I can sink down towards the ground, and then I can plant that knee and then drive back. Again, when I come forward, I can drive out, glute squeeze, sink down towards the ground, really keeping myself really active, and then bring that knee down, drive back. I can add those rotations, same thing, except I pick up the knee, drive away, drop the knee to drive back, and then again, pick up, glute squeeze strong, I drive that hip down, drive away, come back. So another nice option is to add a, add a lateral distraction. So this is kind of gently mobilizing this femur back and opening up all the tissues along the posterior chain on this leg. I can add a lateral distraction to help gently mobilize the hip capsule laterally, you could say. And it's all I'm doing is I'm doing the same stretch, except I'm going to be taking this stretch and I'm taking it and I'm turning it at my whole body at about a 45 degree, and I'm turning in the direction of the band. So if the band is on my right leg, I'm turning towards the right. And now from here, same thing, I'm driving this knee out as I glute squeeze to drive this hip down towards the ground. From there, when I come back, I'll come back and I'll lean back just as so, and again, drive out, sink down towards the ground, come back. I can also add the reaches, meaning when I drive out, I can drive away and then come back. I can drive that knee out, glute squeeze, drive forward. I can rotate towards that one side and then come back. I also have the option to pick up the knee here and I can drive out. I could even stay here and just hanging out, driving side to side. or I can hang out and hold that hamstring stretch. No wrong or right. It all feels like you're just opening up different tissues along the front of your hip and the back of your leg while having an improvement in hip rotation too. Know that that hip flexor stretch, when we are coming forward into this hip flexor here stretch, it really resembles, if I face the camera here, it really resembles I'm having everyone drive out in order to glute squeeze and sink the hip down towards the ground, and then I drive back. This drive out is very identical to the bottom of a squat in terms of trying to improve your squat and your range of motion and your depth. This really helps with that hip flexion and being able to come down, and that drive out is so important in order to cross over into our movement patterns. What's really nice about this mobilization is this gently coming forward and back has this effect on this oscillation is called paper clipping, and as you keep going in and out of tension, you're just really helping clear any restrictions around the capsule to allow it to move better. And then when you follow it with movement, you'll see an improvement in your range of motion. And then following these things with movement, whether it's squats, lunging, some kin stretch type stuff, where then you're really creating some strength in that joint along with mobility. Or things if you're going into splits, for example, that's also a great opener. Whatever you do, it's really nice to follow some movement with it in order to keep these new ranges of motion and that freedom that you've restored to that capsule to start using it and creating strength around that joint. So I hope you find this helpful. All right, bye guys.